Very good evening to all of you. To begin with, NSS Mumbai chapter has started in 2019 and is a subsidiary of the National Space Society, registered in Washington, D.C. We are an independent, non-profit, non-partisan educational membership organization dedicated to the creation of spacefaring civilization. The main goal of NSS is to spread awareness regarding STEM and space and provide a platform for everyone where they can learn and engage with experts from the said fields. Today, we have all gathered here for the webinar Moxie with our speaker, Mr. Piyush Kokkar, for his introduction. Piyush sir has been a space exploration enthusiast from an early age. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of Missouri, Columbia. He is NASA JPL's Solar System Ambassador, and he has worked as a member of Mars 2020 Technical Operations Team and also for the MOXIE program of NASA, which included the production of oxygen on Mars, and the instrument also provided successful results. Apart from this, he has given many talks and presentations on NASA missions, and he is also a co-author of the book Diagnostics Radiology Physics with MATLAB, a problem-solving approach. And he has proficiency over various software such as MATLAB, Python, Java, SQL, etc. He has recently joined NSS Mumbai as our subject matter expert for the engineering field, and we are grateful to have him as a guiding beacon for the functioning of events at NSS Mumbai. So I hand over the dais over to you to begin with the session.
Yep. All right. So you can all see me and you can see the slides, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So well, thanks, Sharvil, for the introduction and like having me here to present a webinar on Moxie. So again, like as Sharvil said, I'm a Moxie technical staff and operations team member. As a part of the operations team, I get to operate Moxie on Mars. I'm also part of the Solar System Ambassadors program. It's a program run by NASA JPL, and it's a voluntary program where it's a bunch of basically it's a group of around 1,000 volunteers across the US who share the excitement and joy of space exploration missions. So let's begin. Oh, sorry. All right. So here's the outline of the talk today. I will first quickly walk through Mars, as in like quick facts. Then we will go through overview of the Mars 2020 mission. And then we will begin discussing about Moxie, then operating Moxie. Then I'll quickly go over the current status of the rover, where we are. And then at the end of the presentation, I will point to some of the resources which you can explore later on. So, all right. So to begin with, first things first, Mars is the fourth planet from the sun, which you can see in night sky as well. Martian moons. Mars has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. They are very small in size. Gravity. So on Mars, you would experience like around 62.5% less gravity than we have it on Earth. Mars atmosphere. So left side is, sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. So left side is Earth, and that is compared with Mars. So on Earth, as we have like 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. However, on Mars, we have 96% carbon dioxide, and rest of the gases are like trace gases. So predominantly it's carbon dioxide on Mars. Other than that, if you notice, so what this represents is how the density of the atmosphere is. So Mars has a very thin atmosphere. That itself poses a lot of challenges. So which I will talk about it in my coming slides. Mars, 1 year on Mars is 687 days, which is approximately 2 times as Earth year, and also 1 Martian day is basically 40 minutes longer than Earth day. And 1 Martian day is called as 1 sol. What you're seeing here in this picture is it's an image taken by Curiosity rover, which is currently on Mars. And what you're seeing here is sunset on Mars. All right, so now moving over to the overview of Mars 2020 missions. So there have been several Mars missions so far, starting 1970s. when the first Pathfinder mission landed. And then apart from that, since then, there have been like many orbiters, various rovers on Mars. And kind of every Mars missions has, they had an objective they wanted to study. So past Mars missions basically have followed Mars. And like the way it works is you send a rover or you send an orbiter over to Mars, and then you study, and then you send a new rover or new orbiter based on the knowledge you learned from the previous mission. So that's how our knowledge kind of grew over the period of time. What we know is there is a plenty of evidence that water actually flowed on Mars in past. So we believe that Mars could have looked like this in past, but it looks something like this in present. So we know that planet was wet and habitable, and Mars has all the basic building blocks of life. Uh, However, we don't know if Mars did ever have life. So again, like the difference here is we know that whatever the basic elements required for existence of life on Mars, existence of life, that those actually existed on Mars, but we don't know if Mars ever had life. So that is the goal of the Perseverance mission. One of the goals of Perseverance mission is to search for ancient microbial life, plus to prepare for human life. So to prepare for humans, the Perseverance rover has two experiments. One is the MOXIE, which I will go in detail in later slides. The another one is the helicopter, the Mars helicopter. It's called as the Ingenuity helicopter, which kind of demonstrated the first ever flight on any other planet. Apart from that, there is another instrument called as MEDA, which kind of regularly it monitors the weather on Mars. Because when we will be on Mars, we would want to know like how the temperature varies, or how is the pressure, or how fast the wind is flowing. The Perseverance rover landed at a place called Jezero crater. So as you can see, this was the landing ellipse. Landing ellipse means when it was basically about to land, so it could basically land anywhere in this spot. This is how the Jezero crater looks like. So as you can see, again, like I'm not much into planetary science, but based on my understanding, so there's a term called delta. So as you can see in this picture, the deltas are clearly visible. So delta is a point where where one stream of water is coming and then it is breaking into multiple parts. So this shows that Mars had valleys and delta deposits around the landing ellipse. If you are curious to know how does the weather look like on Jezero crater, so So this is, so as I mentioned earlier, so MEDA is an instrument aboard the Perseverance rover, which constantly measures the weather on Mars. So this data was taken on September 28th, which was Sol 216 on Mars. High you can see is minus 21 degrees Celsius, and the low was minus 78 degrees Celsius. Quick overview of the instruments. So Perseverance has 7 scientific instruments. Besides MOXIE, it's the RIMFAX, it's the radar. Mastcam Z, these are the panoramic cameras. SuperCam is a micro imager laser. PEDA is the weather station. There is a spectrometer Sherlock. It's on the arm of the rover. And another spectrometer is called as Pixel. Besides, in terms of the power, so this little guy at the end is the power system. It is basically has radio isotope power system. Basically it produces the electricity using the decay of the radioactive element, and it has batteries. So basically, the radioactive element of the radioactive decay of the radioactive element, it charges the batteries, and that's how Perseverance gets its power. One more thing is the wheels of the rover. So the speed of the rover is 4.2 centimeters per second. So it is approximately 152 meters per hour. Cameras. So rover has a lot of cameras. This is just a picture of like what kind of different cameras it has. So at the front, the front has cameras. Has cams means basically it detects any hazard and while it is driving. Similarly, it has rear hazard cameras. For navigation, it has navigation cameras, and again, like it has a stereoscopic view. So stereoscopic means like a human has two eyes. Two eyes kind of gives stereoscopic views of the field. On the arm as well, it has the Watson and Pixel. They also have cameras in it. Another thing which was like really cool is some of the cameras which did actually record the landing. So what you are seeing in this image is this is the terrain of Mars, like real Mars. On the left side, this was how the rover was actually tied to an assembly called a sky crane. So the rover basically was getting pulled down and then being put on the surface of Mars. So once that is done, so they actually cut the ropes, and then the sky crane basically flies to a distance place and it just crashes. So this all was really fascinating and exciting because we had past landers which landed on Mars, but we have never seen a video, or basically we have never seen how really landing on Mars looks like. So this was the first video we got from Mars about landing. The rover also has microphone. So let me play the sound if you can hear it. So it's basically it's very low sound, but the idea with having microphone on the rover is to basically we want to record sounds on Mars. And as I mentioned earlier, Perseverance carries a small helicopter called as Ingenuity helicopter. And again, like it was a technology demonstration, and the idea with sending a helicopter on Mars is someday we can actually use an instrument like this to basically scout, and which is actually being done right now. So the primary goal of the helicopter was to demonstrate a powered flight on Mars with some different different flying speeds, which it did in its primary mission. And now the mission of the Ingenuity helicopter has been extended, so that is actually scouting for the Perseverance rover. Communication with Earth. So rover has three antennas. One is the high gain antenna. Two antennas: high gain antenna and low gain antenna. It communicates with Earth via a dish, set of dishes called as the Deep Space Network. In this picture, the picture is not a live picture, but I have actually linked a website. So that is the DSN Now. So you can actually visit, you can actually see which antenna is communicating with which spacecraft at a given point of time. So these antennas are placed on 3 points and on Earth, locations on Earth. So basically the idea is to have constant communication with our orbiters and landers. Okay, so now moving on to MOXIE. So MOXIE stands for Mars Oxygen ISRU Experiment. ISRU stands for In Situ Resource Utilization, and the goal goal of MOXIE is to produce oxygen using the carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere. Now, the question is, why do we need oxygen on Mars? So we need oxygen for two things. Number one, for astronauts to breathe. And number two, for bringing them home. Now you could think, why would you need oxygen for bringing someone home from Mars? The reason is because the rocket, we will need a rocket basically that would basically bring us back from Mars to Earth. So the rocket basically needs oxygen for burning the fuel. Uh, to give you kind of very small example of why oxygen, or like very small example is, you might have done that experiment while in school, that you have a candle and you light it up. When it's in open air, it basically lights fine, but as soon as you put a glass on it, or basically as soon as you basically cover it with a glass or put a lid on it, then slowly it kind of turns off, because you need oxygen for keeping that flame alive, or to burning. So you have like an option, right? Because you need oxygen to burn the fuel. So what you can do is, you can actually bring the fuel from you with you from Earth to Mars, but that is expensive. So the idea is, so MAV here stands for the manned access vehicle. So let's say if the launch mass is 40,000 kgs. So for this mass, you will need around like 22,700 kgs of liquid oxygen. And to put it in short, 1 kg, it is actually going to be very costly business if you really want to bring oxygen from Earth to Mars. And this includes actually like because if you need, like if you basically carry this much amount of oxygen, then the weight of the launch vehicle will also increase, and if the weight of the launch vehicle will increase, then you will need more fuel to actually put that launch vehicle from out of the Earth's gravitational field. So it's kind of a domino effect. You kind of increase one thing, but then increasing one thing would kind of increase everything which is in the chain. So we actually saw earlier that Mars has carbon dioxide, 96% of carbon dioxide, which is in abundance. So what that means is, what you can actually do is, you can take that carbon dioxide and can kind of use that carbon dioxide to produce oxygen. And this terminology is known as ISRU, which is known as the in situ resource utilization. So in very simple terms, you are creating one resource using another resource. ISRU, the term ISRU is more in context of the planetary science, as in like you are using ISRU on planets or asteroid to mine the resources. But if you really want to understand that in very simple term, on Earth, what you could consider is, let's say you go on camping and then you forget to bring the wood with you for fire. What an easy way or alternate way for you is to like just hunt for the woods and forest and just use that and light it up. So MOXIE is an experiment to verify and validate the technology of Mars ISRU. There are two goals of MOXIE. One is to operate at least 10 times in 1 Mars year. Again, like as I mentioned earlier, 1 Mars is equivalent to 2 Earth years. So we want to operate MOXIE at least 10 times in 2 Earth year. And the other goal is to produce at least 10 grams per hour of oxygen. A very simple way to understand MOXIE is really like a tree, which takes in carbon dioxide and then it produces oxygen. Here is how MOXIE looks like from inside. So the left part here is the motor, which compresses which sucks the atmosphere of Mars. Now, the second one is the compressor, and the third one is the solid oxide electrolysis assembly, or in simple terms, it's called as SOXY. So why do you need motor? Because as I said earlier, like the density of the Martian atmosphere is very thin. What that means is, if we actually just wait for that sufficient amount of carbon dioxide to basically come, it will take a really long time. So that's why motor plays an important role. It basically sucks in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide. The scroll compressor, it compresses the carbon dioxide. The reason for that is because the density and the pressure of the Martian carbon dioxide, the atmosphere, is very low. Dimension is approximately about the size of a car-sized battery. It weighs 17 kgs on Earth and around 6.41 kgs on Mars. A power required is 300 watts. And oxygen production rate is approximately 10 grams per hour, and the operation time is approximately 4 hours. So one complete operation of MOXIE takes around 4 hours. This is another view of MOXIE, how it looks like from inside. So on the left side, we have the sensor panel assembly, which kind of have all the different sensors for measuring numerous things, which goes on while the MOXIE is running. The gold box here is SOXY assembly, that is the solid oxide electrolysis. That's where really the process takes place. And this is the scroll compressor. So this is how it works. So first we take Martian atmosphere. Then in the CO2 acquisition compression unit, we actually, like as I said, like we acquire carbon dioxide and then we compress it. After we compress it to the desired pressure, we pass the carbon dioxide to the solid oxide electrolysis, or the SOXY unit, for oxygen production. The third part is the composition measurement, which measures the oxygen purity and rate and many other things. And at the end, we exhaust the oxygen. So like the future goal is to actually store oxygen, so that humans can actually breathe, use that oxygen for breathing and burning the fuel, as in like coming back. But right now, because it's a technology demonstration, so we don't really store the oxygen. We just we measure the purity, we measure the composition of the gas, and then we just exhaust, or we just spread it out in the Martian atmosphere. So here's the process, how it works. So step one, MOXIE first heats up this oxy to 800 degrees Celsius. Then in step two, we collect the thin carbon dioxide, we filter it, and then we compress it using the scroll pump. In step three, we pass the compressed carbon dioxide to SOXY to produce oxygen. So here is the picture kind of depicting how the chemical reaction takes place. So on the cathode, we get the carbon monoxide. So it split the carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide and oxygen. And on the anode, we get the oxygen. As I mentioned earlier, MOXIE measures the purity of carbon monoxide and oxygen, and then it discards it. And then there are numerous sensors which measures the progress of the run. SOXY, this picture here shows the SOXY. So basically SOXY contains, it's a stack. It's a cell. Okay, so it is and then what you're seeing here, these are the stacks. So stacks is like individual cells stacked together, which kind of produce, which does the chemical reaction of splitting the carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide and oxygen. Here are a few pictures of how MOXIE actually looks like when it was installed in the rover. So this is how. So this is the MOXIE placed inside the rover. In this picture, MOXIE is inside the belly of the rover with other spheres. It has so in this picture you can see like other instruments, the rover computer, and this is where MOXIE is installed on the rover. And this picture is the MOXIE inlet filter assembly, which kind of gets it's kind of an opening for the carbon dioxide intake. Okay, so the next part is operating MOXIE. So the first and foremost important thing while operating MOXIE is how do we ensure that we are not breaking MOXIE on Mars? Because the thing is, if you broke, then there is no one going to go back and fix it. There is no way that is happening. So we really want to make sure that we are not breaking MOXIE on Mars. To do that, we have the way we do it is we have software model of the entire MOXIE system. The software model is developed in a tool called Simulink. So this in the software model, we model everything, every every subsystem of Moxie. And we have software or tools which runs which automate running of the software model. And this tool was developed in a programming language and a tool called MATLAB. We also have a twin version of Moxie here on Earth, which is called as engineering model. So we also, basically, like, the idea is before sending the commands over to Moxie on Mars, we want to run it on the Earth as well, just to see like how the sequence you have programmed, how they are working, or if things are breaking, or the goal, the aim of the run which you want to do on Moxie is that kind of the results are fulfilling that goal. So to understand the operation, there are two terminologies important to understand. One is the uplink and the second one is the downlink. Uplink is when you send the command from Earth to Mars, and downlink is when you get the data from Mars to Earth. One thing you would notice here is in the uplink, the data is being directly sent from Earth to Mars. However, in the downlink, the data is sent from the rover, send the data to an orbiter, and then orbiter send the data back to Earth. This is what basically typically done, and the reason for that is we actually, during uplink, we want to avoid this like having a in-between channel of the orbiter, because let's say if any data get lost during transmission from Earth to Mars, basically, let's say if there's an orbiter, if any data gets lost between Earth to orbiter and then to Mars, we won't have any way to actually verify during uplink process if the rover did get the complete data or not. And then let's say if we miss some data, if the rover misses some data during uplink, then it could actually do bizarre things as well, because you really don't know what the data rover got. However, in the downlink, it's more of like you can always request, or you can like request for the retransmission of data from rover. So here's what a Moxie typical run look like. So we first define the objective of the run. So let's say an objective is to produce oxygen, or like demonstrate the first oxygen on Mars. Then we, based on the objective, then we kind of design our sequence and the commands, and then we run the software model. After that, we run the engineering model, which is, as I mentioned earlier, which is the Moxie twin on Earth. Then we run it on flight software testbed. So again, again, to make sure that whatever data we are expecting and whatever run, the objective of the run we have, it's kind of fulfilling that. If all looks okay, then we deliver the sequence to Mars, which is called as uplink. Then it gets run on Mars. Then we receive data from Mars during downlink. Once we get the data on Earth, we analyze the data, and then that's it. So every typical like Moxie run is like this. So you again like want to make sure that you are not breaking things on Mars by just running first here on Earth and then doing the real thing on Mars. And this plot shows here the first ever oxygen on Mars, which was produced on Sol 60. Which was basically 20th of April here on Earth, and the amount of oxygen was produced during the first run was 5.37 grams. One more thing as a part of the operations I want to talk about here is the living the Mars time. So for almost 90 souls on Mars, and then primary like 90 souls, the first 90 souls on the Mars mission. So everyone who was actually part of the operations team or who was operating the rover, they were following living the Mars time. What that mean was every meetings was actually, let's say every day meeting was moved from day to night to really follow the Mars time. So another thing, as I mentioned earlier, like Mars day is 40 minutes longer than Earth. So let's say today you started your shift at 8 a.m. Then tomorrow it will start at 8:40, and then the day after that it will start at 9:20, and similarly that cycle would continue. So it's very challenging, and it's exciting as well, because you're actually living some other planet's time, but it's challenging because our body kind of needs to be in that routine. Because let's say every day, like today, you woke up at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m., but let's say tomorrow you have to wake up at 40 minutes after, and then that cycle continues. So there will be a time where you are actually waking up in the night and then you are sleeping during the day. So at the end, so I'm gonna go with what's up with Perseverance right now. So current SOAR is 222. Total distance driven, it's 2.61 kilometers. So this is where we landed, and this is where the rover is right now. Total MOXIE oxygen runs were 5. Total Ingenuity flights are 13 flights so far. And I actually forgot to mention here is, which is also another part of the Perseverance rover mission, is prepare for human life. And as a part of that, we wanted to collect the samples and put it in a tube and then store it somewhere on the ground. And the idea is like whenever a next Mars mission will happen, so it will basically bring the samples back to Earth for further study. So as a part of like the current status, the rover has also acquired a rock sample, and it is sealed that in the tube. Other than that, data from MOXIE and all other instruments is basically released to public. And this data means like the real raw data which we get from Mars. So whatever we see while operating MOXIE, or when we actually analyze the data, that is out there for public access, and they can actually see the data and then learn from it. And the last thing I wanted to mention is solar conjunction, which is happening right now between October 2nd and October 14th. What that means is, in solar conjunction, the Mars and Earth are exactly opposite of each other, and Sun is basically in between them. So because Sun is exactly in between Mars and Earth, so the radiations from the Sun can actually affect the communication. What that means is, you can, so this is kind of a period of kind of a silence where we don't really send any data, we don't really uplink anything from Earth to Mars. And because again, like the risk is to losing of any data if you are uplinking data at this time. And then you can always like get the data back from Mars. So like during downlink, and again, let's say if you miss anything, you can again request the rover to send the data back. But if you are sending anything from Mars, there is no guarantee that it would actually reach Mars in its like entirety. So all the orbiters, all the rovers which are on Mars right now, they are kind of in this 15 days period where they are not going to get any data during this period. So before that, like all these orbiters, like for the rover, it has already been sent a bunch of instructions which it needs to do during this 15 days time period. And then after October 14, again, like the operations will resume, and then it will again like continue doing uplink and downlink on everyday basis. And that's pretty much it. These are the resources. I will actually post the link to the resources as well in the chat. And one thing I would like to end my presentation is this everything. The Mars 2020 rover was launched in July of 2020 when the COVID, like the world kind of witnessed the COVID time. And what that means is like everyone in the rover, like everyone in the landing, and everyone involved during that time, they kind of had to do that, like go through like all the, like the constraints of wearing mask and following all the protocols. So basically to commemorate all the healthcare workers played a very vital role during COVID times. They were kind of our lifeline. So to commemorate all the healthcare workers around the world, this plaque was placed on the rover, which is here on the rover. and it shows kind of the perseverance and the dedication of all the healthcare workers around the world to help the humanity. So this plaque is on the rover right now, which is on Mars. And one more kind of a cool thing which I really like is like on every Mars mission there is like something which placed on the rover which kind of relates like how we are doing science, or like our excitement and the passion for learning more. So this picture is one of the calibration target of one of the instruments on the rover. It's very you might need to actually like zoom in to this picture, but and then on this picture it has inscription in different languages, and one of the language is none other than Hindi, and it's written as Khoj Ki Khushi. So I felt like really happy that like all these languages and all these like this having these kind of things on the rover, which is on different planet, kind of makes you feel like our presence, humanity's presence, is on another planet or another world. So that's pretty much it. These are all the slides I have. Thank you again for listening, and thank you again for joining for this webinar. So I'm happy to take any questions you have now.
Yes, sir. Now just move us registering for the webinar. So
Sure.
do you need a quick break for it?
I'm all set. We can go now.
Okay, sure then.
Yep.
So first question is that there is a girl who wants to know about the career in mathematics after BSc. So she is like something new because she is not having much knowledge about it, and she is thankful for conducting the webinar on Moxie.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, like again, I understand that she wants to know about career in mathematics after BSc other than PhD. So I have to say, like, I am not that expert to kind of speak on that matter, but I can kind of give my general things which I have learned in my life so far. So it's more of like you actually need to research, and you need to actually find what are the different things you can do. So I would say, like, talk to your teachers or talk to your friends who are in that area. Talk to them, and then see like what are the opportunities and what are the career aspects you have. The other important thing I would say is like find the thing which kind of interests you the most. So don't really like don't kind of go for blow. So like basically don't really like look for any lucrative or like the field which is in limelight right now. So kind of try to find the thing which interests you the most, and then try to work towards that. I'm not sure if I've answered your question like completely, but that's the one which I can think right now.
Okay, I hope she has got the guidance for it, and she'll refer to someone else for more information. Now, the next question we have is that what are the important inputs from the Perseverance rover about life on Mars?
So yeah, that is a good question. So basically, as you can see, like we are just in this old 222, and it's not even an year. So we landed on February 18, 2021. So it's not even an year. In terms of inputs, I think there are a lot to learn right now. We did our first power flight on Mars. We produced oxygen. Then let's see, we collected the samples. So these all things are kind of like so I can speak about like Moxie in more detail, as in like when we actually like produce oxygen. So although the plot I showed you, that just says that how much oxygen we produce, but that's not really the important thing here. There are so many things that goes behind. So when we actually get the data, we kind of analyze like how much the purity of the oxygen was, or like how much are the other gases in the like other gases that kind of came from Moxie are. So these are the different things we learn from Mars. Now, other thing is we actually want to operate MOX in different kind of atmospheric temperature, pressure, or when the wind speed is high, flow. So these are all the things which we kind of slowly learn as the mission progresses in future years. So uh, I would say all the accomplishments rover has done so far, they are great, and we are kind of still like learning to see what kind of things we are learning from the rover. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah. So moving on to the next one. Since the atmosphere on Mars is very thin, how does deadly space radiation reach on Mars surface, and how can we tackle the radiation coming from space even while colonization on Mars?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So I actually, to be honest, I did not know much about it. So I actually was reading recently about it. So there is a lot of research going on. So cosmic radiation is one of the very important thing which we want to, which we would need to kind of resolve, not resolve, but which we will need to find solutions for tackling the cosmic radiation, because when we actually want to live on Mars, and like let alone living on Mars, we first want to reach Mars. So just reaching Mars, we would be actually facing with a lot of cosmic radiations while our trip to Mars. So there is a lot of research going on to kind of analyze or to kind of understand how the cosmic radiations would affect our human, like the astronaut's human body. So there, and then what kind of, and then once humans are on Mars, then we would need to actually build the habitat which are kind of which will help us actually protecting us from the cosmic radiation. So I can actually I have like couple of links, and one of the links I have is again like on this topic of like how what kind of research is currently conducted right now to understand cosmic radiations on Mars and how we can actually protect ourselves from that. So I will post the link later in the at the end of the slide, sorry, at the presentation, and then you can go through it and read more about it. Thank you.
Okay, sir. So the next one is, what is the estimated capacity of oxygen production that MOXIE is planning to support future crewed missions? And also, what is the purity of oxygen that is required to be used as a fuel?
So right now, so uh, the one of the primary objectives of MOXIE is to produce around 10 grams, 6 grams of oxygen. The purity is around 98%, is the primary requirement of MOXIE. In terms of the crewed mission, so maybe I'll go back to my slide. Yeah. So basically, with the I can give like a more idea about this. So the way it is being planned, or way it is being like proposed by many people, is when you are actually planning on sending a human mission to Mars, you basically send MOXIE, a MOXIE like device, or all the other things you would actually need many months in advance, or I would say like 26 and like around 26 months in advance. And then like once the all the instruments are on surface of Mars, and they kind of start cranking more of, like they kind of start cranking oxygen there, then after a few months, then you would basically send the humans to Mars. So by the time humans reach on Mars, they will have the oxygen to actually come back from Earth to Mars. Now, how much oxygen you will need, the numbers are based on a crew of four. So yeah, that's what I think. That this is based on crew of four. So it also depends on like how many people are really like going to Mars. That number could vary. But now again, like if we are looking for crew of four, then this is amount of oxygen we will need to actually burn that fuel for coming back.
Okay, sir. And how economical is it to convert CO2 into oxygen on Earth by the same method that we are doing over there?
Yeah, so I would say it's not that economical. Because one thing which you have noticed here is the input for MOXIE is carbon dioxide, which is in abundance in on Mars. It is 96%. So basically, if you are breathing there, you are breathing carbon dioxide. So for you to have this instrument working on Earth, we would need that continuous supply of carbon dioxide. So economical, I'm not sure how economical this is going to be, because you would need to develop this technology. And then it would pose like other challenges, because you need that much of carbon dioxide. So again, like I don't know how economical this would be, but this would definitely like need a lot of if we really want to have something like this on Earth. But again, like we would need to consider all the other constraints. Like one of the constraint, as I mentioned earlier, is for actually doing the chemical reaction, we heat up SOXY, which is the heart of the MOXIE, to 800 degrees Celsius. Now, 800 degrees Celsius is a lot of it's a huge temperature, and to actually reach up to that temperature, you would need to actually power up the device. Now, this device is really size of a car size battery. And then it kind of produces around 10 grams of oxygen, which is not sufficient for our purposes. So actually, when we really want to like scale it up, we will need a huge, like bigger MOXIE, and that would mean we will like more power. So uh, there are a lot of constraints which kind of involves here.
Okay, that was a wonderful explanation. And some of the participants have a doubt about the using Python as a machine learning language, and also what are the ways to pursue a career in astronomy or astrophysics research, especially using AI and ML. And if they want to know that if they can switch to this domain after working in a totally different domain previously.
Yeah, so the answer to the first question is yes, you can use Python or any other language for machine learning and AI. The second question, and you can also try MATLAB and Simulink. Sorry, MATLAB. That's also a powerful tool for using machine learning and AI. The second question is how can I actually switch? So let me give you my example. Okay, so my background is engineering. I did my master's in electrical computer engineering, and then my bachelor's was also in the same field. However, I was always interested in like the space science and space exploration. So what I think is like the change won't happen drastically. That let's say you woke up tomorrow and then you got a job or you started working in astronomy and astrophysics just tomorrow. So that has to be a gradual change. So if you are really interested in that, then start reading about it. Start like nowadays you have a lot of online courses like the MOOCs, which you can take and learn things using from that. So what you could do is you start building your knowledge, or you start reading about like you start reading about these fields slowly and gradually. And then the AI and machine learning is a very powerful tool, which has numerous applications in space and in other fields as well. So you can, what you can do is you can actually try to do some like small projects, and then one of the example I can give you is, let's say we were talking about radiation and cosmic radiations on like effect on astronauts body, right? So you can actually use AI and machine learning to actually make predictions on that. So start doing all these small projects. You don't have to like take one big step at once. You just need to take one step at a time. So just start learning about it and then do small projects, and then maybe after many years, and again, like as I said, like it won't happen drastically just the next day. It will take few years or some time. So start doing that, start building your knowledge, and like try to kind of pave your path in that direction, and maybe one day you'll be there. I hope that
Right.
answers that question. Yeah.
Right. Keeping up with the technology is of utmost importance nowadays.
Yeah.
So everyone must learn it. Another thing we have is how long is the working life of any system on Mars? That's
Uh,
asked the participants.
any system as in?
Take example of a rover or MOXA itself.
Mhm. Yeah. So for MOXIE, like MOXIE's primary requirement is to run it 10 times in 1 Mars year. Now 1 Mars year is equals to 2 Earth year. So, and then if we take like the average run cycle of MOXIE is around 3 to 4 hours. So if we kind of take the maximum of 4 hours, then we are taking like around 40 hours in 1 Mars years. So that's kind of the requirement of MOXIE. And then you don't always, like adhere to the requirement of like, okay, it's 40 hours, so I'm going to actually build it for 40 hours period. It's not going to happen. So you kind of add more buffer to it. So MOXIE is designed to actually run longer than that. It's just not MOXIE, it's any other, like even the rover, because again, like I can give you another example of the power source. So as I mentioned earlier, the radioisotope, like the radioactive element, which kind of produces the power, like charges the battery. So right now, the it produces around 110 watts of power at the launch, and it is expected to, because that's a radioactive element, so it will decay over the period of time. But it is its lifetime is approximately 14 years. uh, I can give you one more perspective too. That is the Spirit and Opportunity. These were one of the rovers which NASA sent back in 2000s on the surface of Mars. The initial primary goal of both the rovers was 90 souls. Uh, Opportunity lasted more than 15 years. And it stopped working not because one of its instrument failed. It stopped working because there was a huge dust storm on Mars, which kind of covered the solar panels on the rover, and it was so huge. I mean, like it was so dense. It was covered so dense that it actually rover couldn't, because the nights on Mars is really cold. So you need to keep the system up and running. Up and running is like you need to system like be in a formed condition so that like the systems, like the instruments are working, the computer is working. It couldn't do that, so that's why it died. So again, like going back to the question, it is like every rover or any system, you kind of build it to actually like last it more than the minimum requirement, so that like as the mission progresses, you can actually you can test the limit of the system. I think that was a long, not long story long. That was a long story long, but long story short, that was a long story long. But I hope that I answered that question.
Yes, sir. I hope that was correctly answered, and the one who asked got the complete knowledge about it. And the next one which we have is, what's your guess on when humans would inhabit Mars? And is it more important setting up a colony on Mars or building up a bigger space station?
So let me answer the second question. So is it important to build the colony? And by bigger space station, I did they mean the International Space Station or just station on Mars? So I'm
No,
actually
the International Space Station. Maybe they haven't specified it yet, but I hope that space station means ISS.
Uh, so I think these are two different things. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Doing thing on International Space Station and doing thing on Mars has completely different objectives. The thing which you will learn from International Space Station is not related. I mean, it could actually help uh, our future human flights to Mars, or how would actually live on Mars, but they are not. They are not. Like it's not like you choose one over the other. Uh, uh, Now, trying to answer the first question of like how, like when would I think that humans will inhabit Mars? I think this is a very uh, tricky question, because let's say the people who were in 70s who actually sent the Pathfinder rover to Mars, they might have thought, okay, we will kind of get to Mars by 2000s. We are in 2000. We are not in 2000. We are in 2021. So, and we are still not yet there. So I think there are so many bits and pieces here and there which we still don't know, which we are still trying to answer. So I really don't have a right guess on when human will inhabit Mars. So, and also I think the answer to that question comes by all these rovers upon which we are actually trying to build our knowledge. So again, maybe many more years, but
Right.
stay tuned. Yeah.
So we have a participant who has raised a hand, so we'll
Mhm.
let her ask that out.
Sure.
Uh, Garima, you can now unmute yourself.
Uh, Hello, sir.
Hello.
My question, hello. My question to you was, one of the goals of MOXIE was to produce at least 6 grams of oxygen per hour. So,
Mhm.
why only 6 grams? And like, is it sufficient? Like at this rate?
It's not. So 6 gram because it is just a demonstration of if we can actually do this, or if we are kind of doing this, how much is the purity is going to be. So um, it's not sufficient. It's definitely not sufficient because the 5.6 gram which was produced in the first run of oxygen, that is just enough to keep an astronaut alive for 10 minutes. That's it. So it just, and so basically when we actually try to, you can consider MOXIE as a prototype right now. So to actually to validate and verify if that technology of ISRU really works on Mars. So because we really want to test the system, so it is kind of we are not producing more, or like it is, that's the minimum requirement. Also, the other thing which I think is uh, when you actually need more, I think need to produce more oxygen, then the size of the instrument needs to be bigger as well, because the stack which kind of does the chemical reaction right now, it's small, and that is actually constrained by you cannot just that is actually constrained by how much space you actually get to get in the rover. So you have all these constraints. So combining all these constraints, that's, I think that's kind of that the magic number, or that's the number which is right now to actually produce minimum of 6 grams per hour of oxygen. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And sir, what did you have any use of MATLAB in like the MOXIE?
Yeah, so we use MATLAB and Simulink heavily in this project. So Simulink, as I mentioned earlier, so you can still see the slides, right?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah, so this is the Simulink model of the entire MOXIE system. It has all the compressor. So as you can see, it has the compressor, it has the SOXY, and it has the VFCD is basically the sensor system, and the thermal and power. So we model this everything in the Simulink, and of course using MATLAB. And this has actually played a very important role, because whenever we want to run something, we just run it on the model, because if something breaks here, we can actually I mean, like we can detect if things are failing, or if it is erroring out, or it is warning. I mean, like if basically the system is failing, so we can tweak the parameters, and we can rerun the model, and we can verify that before we actually run it on a hardware, we are not actually breaking the hardware. So that's how we actually used MATLAB and Simulink. The other use of MATLAB we used is we kind of created different tools. So this tool here kind of automates this software model, running of the software model. Another tool we created to actually analyze the data we get from Mars. Now, so the thing is, like when we actually operate MOXIE on Mars, or when we actually get the data from Mars, we have we have really less time to actually make a decision of actually if the system is alive. So let's say you ran it, and then we get the data back. We actually want to see if the MOX is still alive, or if something happened to it. So for that, we actually need to make the decision quickly. So that's where we kind of took help of MATLAB to actually produce plots and graphs, which kind of help us analyze the data in very short amount of time. So we kind of develop like different tools to actually create the MOXIE sequences, the commands, and then like analyze the data. So that's how we use MATLAB and Simulink. I will also actually post a link to this article, so there is a link. There is an article on use of MATLAB and Simulink, which was done by MathWorks, who built MATLAB and Simulink. Use of MATLAB and Simulink in Moxie. So you're more than welcome to actually go through that link to understand more.
Thank you, sir. It was
Sure.
very informative.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, now we have Ashish who wants to ask a question. Ashish, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Am I audible?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, sir, I would just like to know about the radioactive decay process. What you have mentioned. How does it, energize the thing, and how does it basically work? If you can give us the brief about it.
So I don't know. First, thank you for the question. I don't know the nitty-gritty of like how really the process happens. But what happens is like when the radioactive like it decays, it kind of produces heat. With the heat, it kind of it produces with the heat it produces electricity, and with the electricity it really charges the battery. So this is like really like very high level overview of like how exactly the process work. But I can actually post a link in the chat about like which will actually you can go through it and learn like how really like the entire process works from radioactive decay, and then how it heats up, and what are the bits and pieces of that entire system which kind of produces electricity, and how it charges the battery. Does that sound good?
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, sir. I'm sorry. I just forgot to ask one more question. Actually, I asked one question. I'm actually a commerce background guy, having an experience around 10 to 12 years into a same field. But astronomy, to be very honest, is my bigger interest. So to rejoin into that industry or to work something on it, if you can give me some kind of suggestions, how can I work on it?
Yeah, so I would say, as I said earlier, what you can do is you can first, so astronomy and astrophysics is a huge field. What you can do is you first need to find out like which part of it really interests you the most. Another thing what what you can do is like there are a lot of online courses right now. There are a lot of resources which you can learn. So what you can do is you can actually try to find resources, or you try to find the online courses on astronomy and astrophysics. Start taking. I mean, like, and if you search for it, I'm sure like you will get hundreds of results. So just pick one which like that looks good to you, and just start with that and start building your knowledge with that. Other thing which I really think is in this field of space exploration, there are, I think, different roles, you can really make a contribution towards. So when I was a kid, when I was in school, I really wanted to contribute to a real Mars mission. So there are different ways of actually you can contribute to. You can also contribute, like you read things and then you spread the knowledge. So that is one of the important things, because like these kind of things, there are people who kind of build these rockets, or they build these spacecrafts, or engineers or scientists who work on that. But the other part of this entire process is like actually reaching out to people or sharing the knowledge about all these missions. So what you can also do is you can read about the astronomy, astrophysics, choose one topic, and then like try to educate others. One important thing about educating others is when you are actually teaching someone, you will need to read more and more, because like you will be asked questions and then you will try to answer. Again, the thing is like you don't actually need to know each and everything of it, because it's a learning process. So I think all in all, what you can do is you try to find online courses, try to just start reading about it, just take online courses, read about it, and help like build your knowledge. And that's what my suggestion would be for you. I hope that answered
Well,
your question.
yeah, well noted. Thank you so much.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, I guess all of us would be happy to see someone from a commerce background having interests in astronomy and any such fields.
Yep.
So that's a good point for all of us. Uh,
There is one
next-
more, sorry, Sharvil. There is one more
yeah,
thing I want to point out. There are programs like Citizen Scientist, where like you can participate on all these studies, all these research as a citizen scientist. So there are so many spacecrafts and orbiters which are around Earth right now, which are monitoring Earth weather, pressure, temperature, like all the other things. So what you can also do is you can actually contribute in that as in like you just get the data and then basically your data will be used to actually train something big. So you are actually contributing, you're making that single contribution to this like the big field. So that's also you can do.
right. So let's move on to the next one. We have Likita over here.
Mhm.
Likita, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, sir.
Hello.
So my question was, how long does it take for you to send information from Earth to Mars? Like, how many minutes does it take? And it'll take some minutes for you to reach back. So, what do you people do like when it is like coming back in that duration of time?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So it takes at least like 10 minutes to I think 30 minutes or 45 minutes. It depends on like where exactly the rover is and how basically it depends on the location of rover and the Earth. So that's how like the time difference is. Now, when we actually send the data, so we actually don't like do it by real time basis. Real time basis as in like you send the data and then you ask the robot to do something and then you are waiting here and then based on that, then you kind of decide what next to do. It doesn't really happen like that. The way it happens is you actually send the data at the start of a day. So let's say like at the morning there will be an orbiter which is basically like passing over the rover.
Hello,
Then
somebody
you
there?
will by the time, hello, hello, can you hear me?
No, so you can continue.
Yeah. So what I was saying is like, so at the start of the day, you will actually send all the instructions to the rover. So it's like, hey, look, you need to drive this much, and then you need to, like picture this rock, or you need to fly the helicopter at this and this speed. And then you need to run Moxie, or you need to actually like perform some other experiments. So all these instructions are basically packed in a file called as like the uplink file. You send that uplink file to the rover, and then the next day you actually get the downlink from the rover. So all the thing that rover has executed in that time period, you actually send the you actually get the data back. And by getting the data back, it actually happens in different parts. So let's say you ask the rover to do something, take a picture of rock at 9 a.m. Mars time. Now let's say there was an orbiter which was actually passing by around 2 p.m. the same day, in the afternoon. Then by the time you have actually like between morning and between 2 p.m., whatever data you have is you can also actually get that data back on Earth, and then you can make the decision of exactly just based on that data, as in like if the rover, the sequences you asked the rover to do, if it actually did it completely or not completely, as in like how does the data look like. And then once you get all the downlink back from one day or one soul, you kind of decide what you would do the next day. So that's how really like the operation works. So when you are actually waiting, you are not really like waiting, you're not sitting idle, because you actually plan in advance. So let's say like 2 days from now, what would you want to do? Or 3 days from now, what would you want to do? So it's a continuous cycle of like learning like what you have learned so far, what like looking at the pictures of Mars, and then seeing which rock you want to picture or which rock you want to sample, and then you send the data, and that's how it actually works. Did that
Okay, sir.
answer your
Thank you
question?
so much. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so next we have someone from the guest it's not named as such. So I request you to first tell your name and then ask the question. Hello. I guess he's not available right now, so we'll move on to the next question from the chat.
Sure.
So, a participant has asked that what criteria is used to choose a landing site on Mars?
Yeah. So again, like I can try to give a brief, like a high level answer to that because I'm not a planetary scientist, so I don't like understand a lot of about that. But the way it goes is like this. Before actually, when the rover, so there are two parts of it. One is actually building the rover, so that's happening, and then the other one is you actually decide the landing site. So the landing site is basically designed based on what really you want to get from the rover. What are your goals from that mission? Once you actually set the goals, then you actually have multiple candidate sites. So it's like team of people from all over the world who kind of gather together to kind of have discussion. Then let's say you propose some landing site for that particular goal, and then there is a lot of discussion, lot of brainstorming going on, because the thing is that landing site is really crucial because uh, you cannot just drive from one place to another place. It will take a really long time for you to do that on Mars. So you actually need to decide how do you choose the landing site. The other thing you consider is like, if the landing site, it could be that like some landing site could be more scientifically is more it's interesting to go, but let's say technically it's not that safe to go because you would also want to land. And believe it or not, landing is the hardest part of the mission because when someone asked that question earlier, the time, so that is very important because when the landing happens, so even if we consider like the minimum time of coming back the data from Mars to Earth, if we consider that as 10 minutes, so by the time you actually wait for the data to come back during landing, the landing has already happened, or if it has supposed to crash, then it has already happened. So you would only know that after 10 minutes. So you really want to pick a site which is engineering, which is technically like it's safe to land there. So there are all these different things goes behind of like how to actually choose the landing site. So based on the goal of the rover, which was actually to find the ancient like microbial life, if like life really existed on Mars. This based on that, this landing site Jezero crater was chosen because as you can see, if let me bring that picture quickly. So here in this picture, so it shows that it has the delta, it has the valley. So it kind of shows that at least the orbiter image shows that water once flowed here. So you could actually find traces of life here at this spot. So that's how actually the landing site is chosen.
Right, sir. So last couple of questions. Ravindra has asked that what steps have taken to ensure that MOXIE withstands low temperature on Mars, and also one of them has asked that how much power is required to run MOXIE per hour.
Yeah, so both are really good questions. So let me answer the first question. So what steps have been taken to ensure that MOXIE withstand the low temperature on Mars? It's not just the MOXIE, it's the entire system. So anything which is basically housed inside that box, that rover, needs to withstand the high temperature, both the extreme temperature, it's high and low as well. So for that reason, there are kind of heaters which kind of run inside the rover, which kind of maintains the temperature during day and night. So that's how actually that have been done to ensure that MOXIE and all the other instruments, including the computer of the rover, withstand the low temperature on Mars. The second question was how much power is required to run. How much power, right? How much energy is required? So Moxie is the instrument which requires the most energy on the rover. What that means is when Moxie run, no other instrument, as in like no other instrument like really can run. To put it this way, because all of the power is actually used by Moxie to actually heat and compresses, actually sucking up that Martian carbon dioxide. So around 110 watts is kind of required. So to put it this way, and then so again, like the idea is when Moxie run is complete, you again like the charge the battery to its full power, the initial state. So like on the next sol or when the Moxie run is finished, it is actually back to its original state.
Right, sir. And one last question that I guess every one of us might be having, that what were some of the hurdles that you faced during the mission, during the Moxie programming, and also what was the hardest part of this project?
Yeah, so I think I can uh, try to answer that in my experience. The hardest part of I think was the landing. Now, I wasn't involved in landing, as in like I wasn't working on the team which kind of did the EDL, like the entry, descent, and landing. But that was the hardest part because that's where things actually start. If you actually miss that, then it's like you're done. That's end of the story. That's end of the show. So in my opinion, landing was the hardest part because as I mentioned earlier, you don't have control over landing. That's the hardest part because you don't have control over landing. You everything that happens during landing. So that phase, it's all controlled and all automated by the rover. It's all programmed. So by the time you actually get the data back, it's either on the ground in like in complete form, in full intact form, or it's on the ground in bits and pieces. So that was the hardest part, in my opinion. What hurdles? I think, in my experience, one of the hurdles we had, of course, was the again like I didn't work in that part, but one of the well, I did in part was actually like how actually to do the operations and everything during the COVID time, and I am pretty sure this must have been the same challenge for everyone out there in the entire world as well. This was the first time I actually worked on a real Mars mission, but from what I've heard in the previous Mars missions is like in the operations, actually everyone kind of goes to the JPL and kind of operate like during the first few days of operations, and like having everyone in one room and then basically operating the rover and everything. So one of the other part was actually we had to actually learn ourselves to actually how we operate it uh, remotely. So I actually operate so now it put it in different way. I operate because I get the chance to operate Moxie. So I basically operate Moxie from my home, and that's how everyone is actually also doing. So other than that, the launch is you basically get a launch window. If you miss that, then you actually need to wait for 2 more years. So getting that done during COVID time was also a bit challenging. I'm pretty sure that must have been very challenging because they had to follow all the constraint and everything. Other than that, I would also like to point one more thing is it's more the hurdle is more about like you need to once you have everything done, all you need to do is practice, 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 and practice. We practiced a lot. Like there were a lot of simulations which were done before landing of actually like how you would operate the thing on Mars. Let's say if there was any obstacle, or let's say like something actually stopped working, how would you actually debug the problem and how would you actually go about that? So that was one of the I think challenging thing which we kind of did just to make sure that, and when we actually did that in Moxie, so we kind of ran into like all these different issues where let's say some software tool didn't work. So we kind of learn because we practice and practice. We learn over the period of time and like what things to actually optimize and how to improve. And basically, when we actually got our data from first Moxie, like when we actually got the first data from Moxie, it was like all perfect. We didn't have any like issues in any of our tools, and everything just went smoothly. So that was, in my opinion, was the hurdle we faced, and that was the landing was the hardest part, in my opinion.
Right, so that was explained very well. And now, in the end notes, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Piyush Kopkar, for taking his time from the busy schedule and being available for us to present this amazing session. And I would also like to thank our participants who joined today for this exciting webinar and came up with some really good questions. And do follow all our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and keep yourself updated with all the events happening at NSS Mumbai. And I would like to say that if anyone has any questions that are unanswered, then I have pasted our LinkedIn link in the chat box. You can just text us over there, and we'll get back to you after having those questions sent to Piyush sir. And with this, I would like to conclude my session, and thank you everyone for joining at Astra.